Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is our Cities, Towns, and Counties for Trails Working Group webinar. I'm Palmer McIntyre with the Great Trails State Coalition, and today we welcome Chuck Flink, who's going to talk about green infrastructure, soft surface trails, and nature preserves. And Chuck is a Greenway master, world-renowned. We're lucky to have him here in North Carolina with all of his expertise. He has worked all over the world, but also significantly here in North Carolina, helping advance some important trail networks. He is the founder and owner and president of Greenways Inc., a company that does Greenways consulting, and he's a published author and just an all-around great person to have on this journey in North Carolina, the Great Trail State. So Chuck, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Palmer. And thanks to everyone for joining the webinar today. And I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm just going to roll right into it. Um, and, you know, this topic actually was one that Sig Hutchinson, my good friend, assigned to me. So, which I love. And before I jump in specifically to the meat of the topic, I just kind of wanted to just talk about, what does it mean to be the Great Trail State? This is something that's been going on in North Carolina a long, long time. We were the first state in the United States to have a state park system. Mount Mitchell was the very first state park, and North Carolina was the first to recognize that a state park system would be important and vital. We have some of the biggest champions in the history of the American Greenway movement that came out of Raleigh, North Carolina, in the state. Lewis Clark, Randy Hester, and Bill Flournoy are really the three people that are largely credited with starting the Greenway movement, the American Greenway movement, in a lot of ways. Lewis wrote about this. He was a noted landscape architect, very famous, and a professor at NC State. And he wrote about this, this city, the Green Fingers of Raleigh, and proposed a capital city Greenway plan back in 1967. That Green Fingers plan appeared in the 1969 Raleigh Parks Plan, a park with a city in it. And then Bill Flournoy comes along as a graduate student and says, I need a master's thesis. And he finds this map with no descriptions in the city's parks and recreation plan. And he authors what I still say to this day is the greatest master's thesis ever crafted out of NC State. You could still take Bill's thesis to this day and go out and build a very, very successful greenway system in any American community. So that set the stage then for Howard Lee in 1977 as part of hosting what is now called American Trails and the American Trail Symposium. Back in the day, it was part of the National Trail System Act of 1968. It was a National Trails Conference. It was held out in Western North Carolina, and Howard Lee was looking, at the possibility of having a coast, basically a mountains to sea trail, is what he called it, and that was the launch of that in 1977, and all the way up to today. All the work that Palmer and Iona and Sig and many others have been doing over the past, 5 to 7 years and beyond, culminating with the Great Trail State designation, the support of the General Assembly, and having a Greenway strategy and a trail strategy in all 100 counties. It's been a long journey and a very powerful and impressive journey. What I would like to advocate for today is that this is a building block for us to do something even bigger, which is to recommend a green infrastructure conservation program for all of North Carolina, and that we would join states like Florida in becoming a real national leader in this movement. Why is this important? Well, North Carolina is going to grow dramatically in the next 25 years. We're going to add around 3 to 3.5 million people between now and 2050. We're currently the 9th most populated state, and when we add this population, we will be probably the 6th most populated state in America. That growth is not going to happen in an even way. The green counties, the dark green counties you see here, are the ones that are going to grow dramatically. If they're red or orange, they're going in the other direction. But nevertheless, we're going to grow really dramatically. That growth is going to be fueled by what we call net migration. In other words, most of the people that are going to come to North Carolina in the next 25 years are not going to be born and reared here. They're going to come from other states. So we're going to see a really big influx of non-native North Carolinians to our state. And also, our population is going to age substantially. 1 in 5 North Carolinians will be over the age of 65 by 2050. So this is lots of changes. And in addition to all of that that's going on, uh, the planet is warming, and it's warming rather rapidly. In July of 2024, last summer, we set a record on this planet for daily temperatures on all 7 continents simultaneously. Um, we had crazy stuff going on. It was hotter in the Arctic Circle than it was in South Florida. On August the 7th. We recorded an all-time high at Raleigh-Durham Airport of 106 degrees. And we have been recording the hottest global temperatures pretty steadily year over year over the past couple of decades. So the planet is definitely heating. And I would just share with you, unfortunately, this is sort of early days for extreme heat. By 2050, 2053, we will have a lot of the country suffering from very, very high temperatures. If you live in Florida, Texas, Arizona, a third of your year will be 100-degree temperatures or more, 1/3 of the year. If you're in North Carolina, the most 100-degree days we've ever had in any given year has been 12. By 2050, the average will be between 30 and 40 100-degree days a year. So very, very rapid temperature changes. And again, we're just setting records every year. This is last year, where almost every state recorded a temperature of 100 degrees or more. And you live on a planet that's 2/3 water. And so when the planet starts heating up, we're going to get more dramatic storms. We've had dramatic storm events. Matter of fact, we just had one over the last couple of days. We had what was called an atmospheric river pouring water. We recorded 2 months of rain in less than 24 hours on Monday and into Tuesday. These are the kind of impacts that we're seeing. And we use this term climate change. It's not really, I think, well understood. It's been politicized. But what's not politicized is the fact that water is the blade of climate change that's cutting most deeply. And that's a quote from the Environmental Defense Fund. And we're seeing this. We're seeing, huge, dramatic, intense rainfall events, lots of flooding. North Carolina is particularly vulnerable in this regard because of the way we were settled. We were river towns up until they hit that red line, which is basically the Continental Divide or one of the divides. And above that, you had to become a land-based town. So we've got very vulnerable communities in eastern North Carolina that are vulnerable to flooding. And we also have an issue with insurance. In fact, if you want to kind of look at the canary in the coal mine on global warming and what's happening with it, the greatest measurement of this is the insurance industry, because they're purely built on risk. And so what they're basically telling you when they're not renewing policies in Florida and North Carolina and the eastern part of the United States, what they're basically telling you is that the risk now is becoming so high, there's no reason for them to get in the business of insuring properties for losses against flood. It's becoming so commonplace that there is no risk left in that equation. It's all going to happen, and they're all pulling out. So we're losing policies. And it's fascinating because this really affects the mortgage market. If you can't get insurance, you can't get a mortgage. I mean, this has a cascading effect, and it's all because the planet is warming and we're getting much more frequent flooding going on across the United States. Many, many years ago, many decades ago, ecologist Aldo Leopold said, "What's good for our body is good for our ecosystem." And what he was trying to say was, humans are part of nature. But we tend to, think of this as, land and water and all of this as being a commodity, but if we would view it as a community to which we belong, maybe we would have more love and respect for it. We live in a phenomenal state. It is not Virginia, Tennessee, or South Carolina. It is like almost the Garden of Eden, if you will. It is the most rich in terms of diversity of species, both in terms of plants, native plants, and what's left of native animals. But it's still very biologically rich and diverse. But we are going through a mass extinction, has been well publicized and well talked about. And it's, we're sort of uh, at this crucible of really causing this. And the giant question is can we live our lives more sustainably? Or, is it all just baked in that these kind of challenges will rule the future? I think it's a good time to kind of understand that this is our spaceship. This is our only home in the universe, and we are biologically, ecologically, we are a part and parcel of this very, very special planet, and very unique state. Um, and it's fascinating when astronauts blast off from the planet over the last 60 plus years. The one thing that they've really been, all of them have been uniformly affected by, is how fragile the planet is. Their perspective really changes. We live in this biosphere, but we don't really appreciate it as much as we should. The ecological construct of the biosphere. We still look at it as commodity based, something that we can take advantage of for our benefit, the way we describe benefit. So conservation is really key to me. I think it's really the most important aspect of the American Greenway movement. I've been saying this since I've been involved in it, a chance to build an ecological framework, to build a resilient framework for both human beings and for nature. And I think it's foundational to the way in which we should look at how we build out the Great Trail State and how we appeal to the diverse ecological conditions that are found in all 100 counties. And I really believe that, one of the problems with greenways today is that from the trail side of the ledger, paved trails in particular, any sort of prepared surface trails are becoming very, very expensive. And so a lot of counties in North Carolina are finding it a challenge to implement some of the recommendations because, a lot of people would like to have paved trails. Um, but I think there's a different model. And I really like what my friend Sig Hutchinson has done in probably 30 years in Wake County, of really envisioning and building out a different kind of park and greenway system that was more based on nature and celebrated natural systems and the ability for people to get into the land and water in a more natural way. And so, this is one of the reasons that he, stressed, we really should be talking more about blueways and soft surface trails and preserves as foundational, to the future of our trail system and greenway system in North Carolina. In my professional life, which is a 40-year career here, I found that there were sort of three areas where we could kind of get into a discussion with people about the need for conservation. One was in the area of water, the second was in the area of wildlife, and the third was the area of lifestyle. And what I'd like to do is to pull from the book that I published back in March 2020, some case studies and talk about how those three things really form the basis for conservation practices. And those conservation practices are not just about conservation, they're about allowing people to use land and resources in hopefully a more respectful way, in a way that educates them, supports what they'd like to do, uh, but recognizes the value of nature. And I'll begin with a project I just had a chance to go back and visit this past weekend, which is the Ann Springs Close Greenway in South Carolina. Now, I met Miss Close. She was in her 60s at the time that I met her 30 years ago, and 30 plus years ago. And we worked together for a couple of years to design a master plan for a 2,100 acre parcel of land, about 20 to 25 minutes south of downtown Charlotte by car. At the time, it was kind of fun because we were just down there and we were reflecting on the 30-year heritage of this conservation strategy. And at the time we started this work, this land there were lots of land. There was not much civilization as you see it today. And so it was a bit controversial to set aside all this land and as a conservation strategy and also make it accessible. But boy, 30 years has changed a lot. And I like to look back 30 years because we're trying to look ahead 25 and say, strategies that we implement today, what will be their impact? What will be their benefit? And it was fun to take people from all over the country who had come to Charlotte as part of our regional trails gathering, and show them this landscape as it is today and how well it's used, and also, how well it's conserved. And it's really the development philosophy is really built on soft surface trails, nature preserves, loving water, wildlife, promoting lifestyle, that people really embrace. This is a photo I took Friday afternoon, almost Friday evening in Charlotte. Excuse me, Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. But this is our group visiting, and this is the Nations Ford Road, which is one of the really historic landscapes in all of North Carolina. But Miss Close, when I was working with her, one thing that she emphasized was, Chuck, I want something that outlives me and outlives you. And so we developed a 100-year vision for this piece of property. And we developed a 20-year master plan and a 5-year action plan. And the thing was, they actually completed the master plan in about 15 years. And so we went in version 2.0 and updated it. And I've really been working on it, for 30 years with them, basically trying to make this a landscape that's both relevant and true to the original mission of conservation. So that's case study number one. Many, many years later, also in South Carolina, I got a call from Charleston County that said they had passed a bond referendum for transportation and for conservation of green space. The voters in Charleston County didn't want to invest in transportation improvements without having balance, in that regard. So it was, I think the original bond that passed was somewhere around, $1.5 billion or something like that. And, 250 million was devoted to conservation. So it wasn't balanced in terms of expenditures. But they did a lot in a very short amount of time to get up to speed with conservation. The idea that I came in with there was, why don't we do a green print for Charleston County? And at that time, nobody really understood the term green prints at all, because it was a brand new sort of conversation. This is about 25 years ago. And I tried to give them a sort of a parallel that, we probably wouldn't build a house, most of us wouldn't, without a set of blueprints. We shouldn't continue to grow communities without a green print, which is to say, what do we value in terms of conservation? What are the landscapes, the land and water and the resources in any community that we really love? The map that's pictured here, by the way, is Mid-South region, which is the Memphis metro area in West Tennessee. So it's the same philosophy applied there, but we applied it to Charleston. So this was a politically appointed group, and there wasn't a lot of agreement really on even the terms: green space, greenways, open space, conservation areas. They couldn't agree on any of it. And I said, well, what do you think you can agree on? Let's focus on that. What do you guys share in common? And they said, basically, after lots of conversation, they said, we share in common a lifestyle, and we call it the low country life. So we've all grown up on the water, in the reeds, in the swamps, in the wetlands, fishing and boating, and all of life is centered around the low country. I said, well, why don't we use that as the basis for building a conservation strategy? They had this 1/2-cent sales tax, which there was one sentence in the bond towards conservation, and that's how it passed. But it created this $221 million for the conservation program. And that was in 2004. We finished the plan in 2006, and we set out this very ambitious goal of protecting green space. It was so successful. It was so transparent. It was so successful. It was so accessible in terms of how they spent all this money, that the voters voted another referendum in 2016 for an additional $210 million for conservation. So $430 million for conservation in 2 different programs. And it was very effective urban and rural strategy. A lot of the funds went into the rural areas because that's where conservation had the most opportunity. In the second referendum, it was a bit more balanced between the two. So to date, they preserved more than 40,000 acres of land since the original plan was adopted in 2006. And that has met a target for protecting a third of Charleston County's land and water resources. So this is a really amazing conservation objective. And when I was going through the different sort of strategies for how they might want to protect, we settled on 30%. Um, and I said, that represents the floor, not the ceiling. Okay. So when you get there, you kind of achieved what I would regard as a minimum level of protection of conservation. You can keep going, and they are. There, in fact, I just heard that they're considering yet another bond referendum in Charleston County for more money to protect more resources. So this is a sort of a division of how they went about protecting everything, the different types of lands. And this is a map that kind of shows where 200,000 acres of land, one third of the land and water in Charleston County, has been protected. They're really beginning to focus on a greenway strategy that would connect all these resources together, which is a little bit late in the game, but it's just the way things worked out down there. But they're having a lot of success with that program. Another project that I got involved in was in response to flooding. And flooding is becoming such a dramatic issue in our state of North Carolina. We just went through a very dramatic and expensive flood event in the western part of our state. It was something around $50 billion in damages. I first got involved in using greenways as a strategy for flood resiliency and protection in Grand Forks, North Dakota in 1997. So this is when the flood occurred. I was called in by the Army Corps of Engineers in the fall of that year, and we began looking at a greenway strategy in the spring of 1998. That's a long time ago. This was a 500-year flood event, just for reference, and the same kind of flood event hit Asheville and Western North Carolina this past fall. If you want sort of a benchmark, so big flood event. Most of the town is flooded. To add insult to injury, the downtown burned down, at least a portion of it, while the city was flooded. So that was, they called it, hell and high water. And I'm going to just show you, this is the tough decisions that we made. This stuff was really unpopular. It was very dramatic. It was not embraced at all by anybody. I mean, we really had to fight this, but we wound up, as part of the overall program of recovery, demolishing 694 private homes, relocating 161 private homes and 414 non-residential structure, converted 2,200 acres into public green space, then added layers of access, 20 miles of multi-purpose trails, parks for wildlife, memorial landscapes, an invisible flood wall in East Grand Forks, bicycle and pedestrian bridges across the Red River, and a program for year-round use. Now, taking you back from 1998 to 2000, let me just assure you there were no takers for any of this. I mean, everybody really thought, and I'm not from there, so I'm flying up there, trying to do my best to work with the Army Corps, to work with the states of North Dakota and Minnesota, the communities, and everybody's just pretty much pissed off. This is a stupid idea. Why would anybody promote a greenway? When we don't have places to go to school, or we can't go to our jobs, our houses are flooded, we're living in FEMA trailers. I mean, anger really ruled the day. And, some stupid idiot is proposing a greenway system. That's how it was all received. It took 10 years before that people really began to embrace the idea. Almost 5 years after we began, we actually hosted the very first sort of Greenway Day, which everybody, when it was first proposed, people thought that was the stupidest thing they'd ever heard of. 50,000 people attended. So we began to really change people's minds and show them the benefit of, a really well thought out strategy to address habitual flooding. This was not the first flood. Floods have been happening forever, but this was the first concentrated effort to use greenways, parks, open space, conservation to somehow begin to mitigate the impacts that happened every year. And we set up landscapes that were deliberately designed as a landscape architect to be very, very low articulated landscapes, things that could be transitioned and made into whatever you needed to do in terms of hosting events. All of this is behind a 54-foot high flood wall, because that was the flood event. It was, 5.5 stories tall in that 500-year storm. And since then, since we finished the project and it's been up and operational, which was around the early 2000s, That flood event has happened at least 4 or 5 more times. So you see that the letters 1997, the numbers 1997 on this monument. The flood has come close to that at least 4 or 5 times since, proving that the work that we did was really relevant and important. And the Army Corps, which was not a really great partner, not very willing partner at the start of this, they came out with an article in Landscape Architecture magazine, I think around in 2016 or so, this was published, said this is probably the best example we have of flood protection being a public amenity. And what they meant was the Greenway element, the Greenway portion of that. So, we've proven that we can use Greenways in a very creative way to add value back after these dramatic flood events and to create pathways forward for people to live with frequent flooding. The final example I'll talk about is one of my favorite projects. I know I've hauled Sig Hutchinson out on a number of occasions to Northwest Arkansas. We were called in by the Walton Family Foundation to work with them on a greenway that would connect 6 cities together. And this was really a transportation-based project. This kind of traffic might look familiar. It might look like Raleigh-Durham to some of you, or the Triad, or Charlotte. This is a similar interstate in Arkansas between these 6 cities. And we essentially were going to go in and build a transportation funded and transportation designed pathway system parallel to that interstate to connect those 6 cities together. We started the project in 2010, and you can actually see the little ribbon of concrete there that is weaving its way in and out of the interstate interchanges and, through these populated areas where we have malls and shopping centers and things like that in residential areas. So that was the goal of the plan. However, I will just tell you that I frequently would say to people, I worked in this project for about almost 6 years, 5 years, that the Greenway is not that ribbon of concrete or ribbon of asphalt. It is the land that surrounds it. And the pathway, the path of travel is the way in which we access this beautiful, piece of landscape among these 6 cities. So I was really trying to, even though I know this looks, it's an industrial sized trail system because of the transportation nature of it. But it's really conservation that surrounds it, and conservation of native landscapes that are both, have natural features as well as cultural features. And we were able to leverage the Tiger program, which is the RAISE program today, and money from the Walton Family Foundation. And I realized not everybody has a Walton Family Foundation, so we have to preface all of this with that. But we created a lot of jobs in the process. And we really, this project has transformed this community in a really positive way. If you've ever had a chance to go out to Northwest Arkansas, you instantly see what we mean by that. But the Family Foundation said, look, we want to do this because it's good for our economy and it's good for the health of the people. It's good for business. There was a major conservation strategy that was part of this. And we worked with the Illinois River Watershed to propose grants, and we were funded by 319 money, EPA 319 money, to the tune of about $500,000 that enabled us to go out and build educational rain gardens and basically green infrastructure project that was woven into the fabric of this entire 36-mile trail. So people can learn about the nature of this area while they're out there, transporting themselves or doing whatever else they're going to do on the Greenway. And there was all kinds of interpretive signs that went along with this. So even though this gets publicized and I think enjoyed a lot of times for its, it's a big trail and it performs all these different transportation functions, I think one of the things I'm most proud about, and I think the Family Foundation is as well, is all the conservation strategies and the educational strategies that are layered in that really educate and inform people about the beautiful landscape that they live in. And it's now part of this regional system that they call the Oz Trails Network, which is largely about mountain biking and nature trails. It's not about paved trails. And the Razorback Greenway becomes this major spine, if you will, kind of like an interstate highway that connects you to all these really unique, spectacular landscapes that are found along the route of this Greenway and in these 6 communities. And they've done some really innovative things, like put a coffee shop in the middle of nowhere. So that's been fun to be a part of as well. And it's really just a great project. And one of the things that they've also done is they've addressed other natural aspects like the migrating corridor for monarch butterflies. So there's really a lot of great conservation strategies that go on as part of the Greenway. So the overall goal of this talk with you guys today is to promote the idea of conservation. Trails can be very powerful in that regard. All kinds of trails, whether water-based trails, footpaths, or even paved greenways. And we just had a chance to tour the Charlotte Greenway system, Charlotte Mecklenburg, this past week, and how impressive all that has been. They're up to over 200 miles now of completed trails. But interestingly, Carolina Thread Trail is sort of part of the Catawba Lands Conservancy, and so much of what they're doing is trying to do conservation in a very big way. Part of the problem is development is happening faster than conservation can keep up, and there's just not enough funding and investment that's offsetting human impact. So that's one of the reasons why I feel it's so important in North Carolina for us to build as a building block of the Great Trail State, move into a really aggressive conservation strategy. And I think going back to what a lot of people feel about greenways and what Charles Little said so eloquently, to build a greenway is to build a community and a chance to leave a legacy for future generations. If you'd like to learn more about these projects and more, they're contained in my book, The Greenway Imperative, which you get through a number of different outlets. I really thank you guys for being part of the talk today, and I'm available to answer any questions, Palmer, and I'm going to stop the share and see if there's any questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chuck. What a wonderful presentation. My mind is churning with ideas. And let's open up the floor to questions.
Yeah, questions or comments, or anybody wants
Yeah.
to share their point of view. Let's have a discussion.
Or projects you're working on that
Yeah.
that you can incorporate these concepts into. I mean, I know in Guilford County, where I live, I'm in Greensboro, our region serves 9 counties in this part of North Carolina, but just thinking in North Carolina and Guilford County, we haven't had an open space bond since 2004.
Right.
On your map, Guilford County was one of those dark green counties that's going to have a lot of population growth in the near future. And of course, we got the Toyota battery plants and, some other developments. And we haven't done that green print planning. And I think that's essential to lead up to the bond. And, but anyway, just the mind is churning with some thoughts there.
I think it's a great illustration, Palmer. And really, when you look at North Carolina and you look at all 100 counties, Wake County has an open space conservation plan. Durham County has an open space conservation plan. Outside of those 2 counties, nobody else really has an up-to-date articulated open space conservation plan. I mean, with those words in it. There are other things that maybe constitute open space conservation, but even when we were down in Mecklenburg County over the past couple of days, because we were down there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the officials with Mecklenburg County and the people we met with were talking about how they wish they'd have gotten ahead of conservation when they had a chance. And now, because of the pace of development, it's rapidly going away. And then we went down into South Carolina to the Ansbridge Close Greenway, and they talked about how that greenway has spurred York County to do other conservation efforts to try to get large chunks of land preserved before they're gone, because the pace of development is happening so fast. So I don't know, any thoughts that you guys have? Well, yeah, Sid, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself there.
There we go. Okay. So Chuck, fantastic presentation. And it's amazing what you've done around the world and throughout North Carolina. I have 2 questions. I'm going to ask the first question, and then if there's not another question, I'm going to ask the second question.
Okay, go ahead.
But the first question is dealing more with greenways, and I have to call you to one of my favorite stories of yours, which is in your book, but it's dealing with the Razorback Greenway. And just for some context to the people on the call, in the middle of this 30-mile greenway in 6 cities, there's the city of Springdale that was one of the latter communities that got built and was very upset because all the energy was going to the edges, to Fayetteville and to Bentonville. And so the story that you told about what you proposed and then literally transformed that town is absolutely one of my favorites. So if you could share that story, I think we would all enjoy it.
Well, I think it's the power of trails and greenways. We're seeing this in North Carolina. If I think of the Acosta Trail up in the mountains, or I think of what's going on with the Cross the City Trail in Charlotte, you can look all around the state and see that these are catalytic projects. They promote economic development, and I think that's one sort of discussion that attracts a lot of people under the tent. You can bring all these diverse people in. But in Springdale, which was in the middle of the project, really, it was a dead community. I mean, it was dead and dying. The downtown, there was nothing going on in the downtown. Tumbleweeds, rolling down the streets. There was like very few activities and very, very little people. And we proposed driving the Greenway right through the heart of the community because Springdale is named for Spring Creek. It was originally called Shiloh. And Shiloh, if you're familiar with the Bible, Shiloh would be a baptismal area, where people would go and be baptized in creeks, and that was the original sort of happening that was in this landscape. And then it turned into this town. Well, in the 70s, they put the entire creek through the downtown into a box culvert. It was part of, quote, urban renewal. And they admittedly lost the heart and soul of their community. And so we proposed, or I proposed, that we uncover it. And of course, everybody thought, again, you're really crazy. There's no way we're going to uncover this creek. And I'm like, why not? Why not do it? Well, number one, we don't have the money, Well, Sig and I have had this conversation a lot. Money is attracted to really powerful vision and powerful ideas. And we had a pretty powerful vision. And I talked to the mayor, and he was like dumbfounded. He's like, wow, I can't believe this. I mean, we really never even thought of this. And then I had this really crazy rendezvous with a member of the Walton Family Foundation one day, and they wanted a tour of the entire project, all 20 or 30 miles of it. Took us all day to do it. But we stopped in Springdale, and I sort of waved my arms around because you're standing on top of a box culvert, talking about the future of a community, and nobody could see anything, and it really looked like hell. And we got done with the tour late in the afternoon, and the question was asked, was there anything of interest to you, that you wanted to go back and revisit and talk about as we drive back to the offices? And he goes, yeah, that idea for Springdale is really appealing. Well, they were the first ones. I mean, they understood the power of vision, and they go, listen, we'll go in on the brick and mortar. We'll pledge to you $10 million on the brick and mortar right now. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. It was only on vision because there wasn't a drawing. There wasn't even a sketch of what we wanted to do. It was just this crazy idea. Well, we were able to, finish the construction drawings, get the project done. Sig has visited the landscape, and it is now the heart and soul of Springdale. It bisects the downtown in a perpendicular manner, and we created basically a downtown landscape that is right in the middle of the city, and it spurred all kinds of economic development. Now, if you go to Springdale, it's the hottest place in that part of Northwest Arkansas where people want to go. All the young people want to be there. We're seeing a growth of jobs, growth of businesses. Springdale was the home of the Tyson's food. And Tyson said to us, because I went and talked to them, they said, we moved out of downtown Springdale, in the 60s. We're not going back downtown. And what they did was, once they saw the power of this vision and how people were really rallying around it, they built a brand new data center for Tyson's in downtown Springdale that employs more than 400 people. And it's right on the Greenway. So, you look at situations like this across North Carolina, and you'll hear, we can't do this, or it's impossible to accomplish this, or whatever. And I've always believed, and my experience as a professional has been, well, your vision just isn't powerful enough. You've got to really go beyond what people might imagine and adopt these really powerful strategies for how to remake these communities. I think it's being done in North Carolina. I'm seeing it done all across our state, and Greenways are very catalytic in that regard. And I'm glad that Sig, wants me to share this with you, because I think it's a great illustration of how this intersection of conservation and the economy, they are not exclusive, they're actually inclusive. And that's one of the reasons why I'd like to see more counties and more municipalities adopt conservation strategies, because I think it will promote a broader base of economic development, and support more jobs and support better quality of life for people in North Carolina communities. And I think the Razorback Greenway is a good illustration of that.
That's a great story. Sig, why don't you ask your second question?
I'll be happy to. So Chuck, amazing. And one of the things that you deserves to be mentioned is the Walton men also ask you what property they ought to buy in downtown.
Yes. I was invited to a dinner. I mean, believe it, this is sort of crazy to even think about it, but I was invited by the Walton grandsons, who now control everything, Stuart and Tom. And we were sitting around at dinner. They pull out a map of downtown Springdale. And they're like, which property should we buy? Now, you have to keep in mind, this is a community in which there's no real estate happening. So they literally made all these purchases, pennies on the dollar, if not even more. And now, now there's all kinds of economic development going on. So, I mean, but this is the power behind vision. And I would say that these opportunities exist all across North Carolina, so.
All right, so Chuck, my next question is nature preserves, and in Wake County, we have been preserving land. And currently have 7,500 acres through a potential reservoir that most likely will never get built, and other watersheds, 7,500 acres that is just sitting there in public use. And so this idea of nature preserves, I think, is perceived to be gaining traction as people want to get out into the natural realm to enjoy it. So I would really enjoy, just a better understanding of where we are historically with this understanding of nature preserves and how much we're focusing on it, and what is the public thinking about it, and how do we get more of it, and how important are they? Those types of questions.
So I'm going to go to a different county to start this, because I'm going to go back to Charleston County. And when we started on the Greenbelt plan, I got a call from landowners. And the first call was, Mr. Flink, we're taking you to court and suing you. I was like, for what? that you're proposing this plan. And I'm like, I don't think there's enough evidence that a court's going to take up your lawsuit that I have an idea in my head that I want to protect land. And I said, well, what's your objection anyway? Well, we don't want people to come in and take our property and limit our ability to do whatever we want to do with it. And I said, okay, what if we made a different proposal? What if we asked you to join us in this conservation strategy? Which the response was, why the hell would we agree to do that? You're just going to limit our economic, abilities, with our land. And I said, what if we could prove to you that we wouldn't? What if we could prove to you that we would enhance your economic development opportunities? And that was the strategy. And so I feel like in North Carolina, sort of a low bar, if you will, a low cost strategy that almost all 100 counties could get involved in would be to build this system of interconnected sort of nature preserves and footpaths. It doesn't require you to have millions and millions and millions of dollars to build a successful greenway system, a successful park system. You could actually go the route of nature preserves and foot trails and make them more sort of a partnership with your private landowners, a partnership with your community at large, with your farmers, with your landowners, with abandoned textile mills, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's just lots of landscapes that could be interconnected. And in fact, we saw this on Thursday morning down in Charlotte. We went to the Daniel Stowe a botanical garden. We went to a former mill site that had been conserved, has still got an active business inside of it, but the mill owner, at least the great grandson that was involved this day, talked about how conservation of all these resources fueled the economic development strategies for this, rural community in Cabarrus County. So I think this is kind of a really great model, and I like what Wake County's done. I think Wake County has one of the better models of preserves and nature trails and things like that that is replicable. And it was deliberately at the time by Wake County proposed 30, 40 years ago as a low-cost strategy for Wake County to get involved in parks and trails. This would be something the county could afford because it doesn't require huge amounts of staffing. It doesn't require huge capital investment. It's a fairly low-cost strategy. And that's what I like about it for all 100 counties. And if we want to build upon the Great Trail State, we could build the Great Conservation State, and we could build it through this strategy of approaching, landowners and just saying, hey, you've got both natural history and cultural history, in your land. How do we unlock that value? And how do we create through partnerships a strategy where we invite curated public access, to whatever, floats your boat in that regard. And we think about ways of developing a system across our county to give people access to this, these beautiful lands, and promote economic development and conservation. And so that's kind of SIG. That's my big, bold idea. And look, I know that you're going to find people that will object to this and say, well, we can't do that. That that's right off the bat. So everybody's going to say, but they can do it. And they probably should do it. Because the alternatives in North Carolina, with all these people coming, is that we're likely to lose in the next 25 years a lot of the natural and cultural landscapes and values that make North Carolina such a great place to be. And so if we don't make the effort to do this kind of a strategy, we're not going to like the alternative. Those who will be around North Carolina in 2050 and beyond are just not going to like it, because market forces being what they are, they're just going to steamroll these counties, which is really what's happening in Johnston, Chatham County, counties that surround the urban areas of North Carolina today. These rural counties are getting just crushed by the population growth and the suburban growth that's going to happen. And none of them have any of these plans in place, Palmer. None of them, Johnston County, Harnett County, Chatham County also have no conservation strategies. And so they have nothing to organize growth around. So it's just a free for all, and it's like a giant, set of bulldozers that just come across the landscape. So, adopting these plans, having them on the books, helps to organize growth, helps to frame it, helps to create growth patterns that people will be happier with. And that's the idea behind this strategy.
So is that the starting place?
It's a starting place for me. And I really think it's a conversation that all 100 counties can have. I think that they can, get together, have landowners, have business interests, have conservationists, different outdoor groups, trail groups of all kinds, water trails, horse trails, hiking, biking groups, all sitting around together and have a conversation and just say, what do we like about our county? What are the landscapes? What are the lifestyle that we enjoy about our county? How can we go about ensuring that those landscapes and those lifestyles and those features are here 50 years from now, 100 years from now? What kind of strategies could we work on together as a legacy for future generations that would ensure that they're around? And at the same time, we do no harm. We're not taking away values from people today. We're not limiting their ability to do what they want with the land, but we're creating such a huge value proposition that they want to be participants. And I think, there's examples of this that already exist in tough places like Charleston County, this work that SIG has done in Wake County, that point to success stories. And so people aren't reinventing the wheel. They're not even inventing anything new. They're just looking at the strategies that these other counties use to do it and follow the playbook.
This is so invaluable. Any other questions for Chuck?
You guys have been good to let me run off the mouth here today. And I hope that some of what you've heard today is helpful to you. If you have any follow-up questions or whatever, you can always reach out to me or reach out to Palmer or reach out to SIG. I mean, there's lots of folks in North Carolina that can be helpful, but I've appreciated the opportunity, Palmer, today to conduct the seminar. Glad it's been recorded, and hopefully others will want to tune in and listen as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Chuck, for this invaluable and inspiring talk. And thank you all for attending today, and take care.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.